Hey, I'm Jesse from the Bearable team. One of the most common questions we get is kind of like, what data should I share with a doctor or a therapist? How do I prepare for a medical appointment? What kind of data should I share from within the app ahead of an appointment? And so I just want to run through the kind of way that we think that it's helpful to set up Bearable so that you can kind of like speak to your doctor and answer their questions in a way that's going to be useful. I think one of the things that we've heard from the community over the years is that just kind of like sharing tons of data with a doctor doesn't really work. They're not going to have a positive response to you just kind of like throwing everything you have at them. I think it's often better to work within the constraints of like the information that a doctor is going to find helpful and useful. And so I want to look today at the kind of questions they might ask you during an appointment and how to kind of set yourself up for success in that situation. I basically have gone and Googled like, what is my doctor going to ask me during an appointment? What is a doctor going to ask me before giving me a diagnosis? Like, it's important to go and find out the questions that you're likely to come up against in an appointment, especially if there's something you're seeking from that appointment. I've looked at a few different resources, kind of like, some of the top health publishers, some of the like websites like the Mayo Clinic or the National Institutes of Health, CDC, places like that online to just like collate the really common questions that seem to come up over and over again in terms of like what will get asked in an appointment. And so I've kind of outlined that here. And we're just going to run through how you would answer each of these questions using Bearable. And I think that's really how Bearable is going to be most helpful, rather than just screen grabbing reports or like screen grabbing kind of like data from the app, or even just like sharing a CSV of data, which is possible. Is going to be more useful, I think, for you just to be able to answer your doctor's questions with Bearable. So let's run through that today, and I'll kind of also show you some of the things that maybe people have found helpful to screenshot and share with the doctor as we go through this in kind of support of answering these questions. So what brings you in today? I think this is a really important thing, is that like, certainly in the UK, I know this is true, I imagine it's similar in the US, appointments are often limited to maybe like 10 to 20 minutes, maybe tops. And so it's really important that you have a like priority thing that you're going to speak to your doctor about. If you want to see what your priorities are, I imagine when you booked an appointment, you probably know what that is. But in the Bearable app, there are a couple of ways you can look at this. So you can maybe view your weekly report, but I think just in the trends section of the trends tab, you can take a look through each of your different health metrics and see which of them are like trending upwards, which of them are like getting worse, and so therefore might need like attention more so than others, because you're going to have symptoms that are more severe, you're going to have a condition that is more severe than another one, and whilst they might kind of have a relationship with each other, it's going to be most useful to tackle your most severe issue at any time. You're going to have a sense of what that is anyway, but basically in this section you can tap on and select any of your different symptoms that you have on your home screen, and you can take a look at like which of these are changing, which of them have become most severe. You can see that overall my symptoms are down, but actually recently in the past couple of days they've been increasing again, they've been trending back upwards. Sleep isn't really an issue, time of sleep isn't really an issue, energy seems fine even if there was a dip here. So I think the thing that would bring me in today is that my symptoms have been increasing. And then we can maybe look at my most prevalent symptoms. We can see that fidgeting, waiting mode, task paralysis, they're the kind of top 3 most prevalent symptoms. They're all ADHD related for me. And I can see that like, whilst they've been reasonably okay, I've been having more severe ADHD traits in the past few days. So what I would say is what brings me in today for my appointment, the most severe thing that I'm experiencing, my biggest issue right now is that my ADHD traits seem to be more severe, and that's how I would answer that question. I would look at all of my health metrics, figure out which of them are worst based on out of sleep, mood, energy, symptoms, and then also symptom prevalence, like what my priorities are. So I can even dial in and say, I'm struggling with fidgeting, waiting mode, and task paralysis specifically. So not just ADHD, but these symptoms of ADHD. To some degree, that answers the next question here as well. Like, what are the symptoms? Well, fidgeting, waiting mode, and task paralysis. I think it's important too to point out that, like, when you set up tracking in Bearable, it can be useful to Google what are the common symptoms of a condition. So, like, you obviously have a subjective experience of what your symptoms are, and maybe you're not sure what condition they relate to. But if you have an inkling that maybe you have, whether it's depression, anxiety, ADHD, some form of chronic pain, some form of chronic fatigue, whatever it is, go and Google the common symptoms. Go and look at how medical professionals refer to the symptoms, and then set those up in your symptoms section. You can tap the Add Edit button. You can like add your own custom symptoms here, and make sure that you're using the same language that a doctor uses to describe these symptoms, or at least that are like widely accepted as the conditions or the traits, the symptoms of a condition. And that's going to make it easier for you to communicate with somebody, with a medical professional, about the kind of like the symptoms you're experiencing, because you're already measuring them and able to refer to them in the language that is familiar to a doctor. So when did my symptoms start is the next question on this list. What we can do here, again, is we can go to our Trends tab. We can click into one of these symptoms, and I can say, okay, well, I started measuring them on this date. Presumably that's because when I first noticed them occurring. If you've got more data, you can kind of track back and see if there's a date in the past. Another way to do this is actually from your home screen. You can go to your calendar and you can look back using the symptoms tab. I know that, which was it? Fidgeting was, let's use task paralysis was one of those most prevalent symptoms. We can scroll back and say the first date where I started tracking the symptoms and they were most severe was actually back in June. I seemed to have kind of like moderately severe symptoms on that date. And then obviously the limitation here is this is a test account, not my real account. And so there's not a ton of data here. I've just populated certain things. But one way to go and look at when these symptoms began is to just use your calendar, select symptoms, select this specific symptom, and then look back at when you first began tracking this. You're going to be able to give your doctor the exact date when these symptoms were most severe, when you started noticing them. In here as well, you can also look at things like factors and kind of overlay them and see if you can see any correlation between certain like activities that you do and then changes in symptoms. Let's not worry about that for now. I think basically the calendar is going to be useful for saying dates on which symptoms were more severe, less severe, when they began, when they ended, etc. Have your symptoms gotten better or worse? Again, you can kind of use the calendar to see that. So you can say here, actually, my symptoms have been a mixed bag. Some days they're mild, some days they're really severe. Overall, they seem to be moderate or mild. So maybe not, maybe the calendar's not the best place to view this. You can also use the year in pixels to again look at symptoms. You just need to select through to the symptom you're looking for. Maybe this, with more data again, will give you a bigger picture of whether over time these symptoms have improved or worsened. Again, I think the Trends tab here is incredibly useful. So you can kind of like pick the symptom you want to take a look at, change the time range, and we can say, cool, fidgeting has gotten worse in the past few days. To answer the question, have they gotten better or worse? So recently worse, over the 30-day period, we can see actually they've improved. So the previous 30 days, they were worse. This current 30-day period, they're better. But I'm worried because in the past few days, they've gotten worse again. This might be something that's useful to screen grab and share with your doctor. So something we've been told by Bearable members, if they are going to share data, it helps to answer a question, screen grab one of these things, put it into, for example, like a Word doc online, and then turn that into a PDF to send to their doctor, or print out and take with them. I think often printing out and taking with is a better solution. You've heard that as well. So here, if you've got a specific question that you're answering and you have data in the app to kind of help answer it, this is going to help illustrate that. So I would say this is the priority symptom that we've outlined. They're going to have questions about whether it's better or worse and kind of how it's changed over the short term and the long term. This is one way to illustrate that and to kind of show the complexities of how it's changed, rather than just saying it's better, it's worse to your doctor. You'll have some data to kind of reinforce how it's better and worse and over what period it's better and worse. Does anything I do make symptoms better or worse? So this is where the impacts tab is going to be helpful. You can tap into mood. You can tap into, let's say, task paralysis, and we can change between best and worse. So we can see that sugar is making my task paralysis work. Using my phone in bed is making it worse. Having a dog in the bedroom is making it worse. Some of these are all of these are correlations and not causation. And so you need to think through how likely it is each of these is really contributing. So sugar and task paralysis makes sense. Sugar has an impact on my ADHD, therefore it's likely to have an impact on my ADHD symptoms. Having a dog in my bedroom might impact my sleep, and maybe that has an impact on my ADHD, it has an impact on my task paralysis, but certainly it's unlikely that there's going to be a direct cause and effect between a dog and my task paralysis. Poor hydration, again, might have an impact on my ADHD, might have an impact on my task paralysis. So I can make a note here that poor hydration, poor sleep, sugar are maybe having a negative impact on my ADHD symptom that is a priority for me. So one of the ways that you can make a note of that is you could either use your discoveries tab and select the things that worsen, and we could say sugar impacts a lot, and poor sleep impacts it, and poor hydration. And then essentially, in a doctor's appointment, you will have these saved. So you can just go to your discoveries tab and you can say, oh, I can see that there are these 3 things that are top of the list from my impacts tab that have the most likely negative impact on task paralysis. So you can do that here. Or alternatively, you could turn on your extra notes section and similarly say, today I observed that the things most impacting task paralysis were sugar, poor sleep, poor hydration. And then this is going to appear, I saved that on a silly date because I changed it. Let's actually copy that over to the most recent date. Here we go, confirm. So now when I look at my timeline, if I sort by extra notes, I can see that made a note. excuse me, I made a note that outlines these observations ahead of an appointment. I know that I can go into my appointment, check my recent notes, and this information is here for me. If the Discovery tab doesn't serve that purpose by itself. So another question your doctor might ask is, do the symptoms affect my daily activities? And which ones, and how do they impact them? One way to track this, and this is, again, something that you should set up in advance of a doctor's appointment. You should track this for a week or two, or as long as possible before an appointment. You can do this in your other factors section. I've set this up in a custom group called warning signs, so you can use the add edit button to add a category. I've called this warning signs, and I've added the things that are kind of like warning signs that my health is having a like bigger negative impact on my overall kind of well-being, my ability to do common things. And so being able to socialize, being able to work, being able to complete everyday tasks, these are often markers of how severe a health condition is. So your symptom severity can be high subjectively, but actually often a medical professional is going to want to know how much those symptoms are impacting your ability to perform everyday tasks in your life. Can you function in society? And so actually tracking these three things, maybe there are some other site, you can see I've got struggle to get out of bed. That's kind of probably less of a concern here because it probably comes under everyday tasks. These three things are going to help your doctor to understand like how much your health is impacting your capacity to kind of like your capacity to be a functioning member of society, essentially. So I've tracked these as factors. What you can do is, once you've kind of tracked them over time, you can have a look in your trends tab under the factor breakdown at a count of how many times these things have occurred within a 30-day period, within a year-long period. And so you can get a sense of like how many days over a set period of time have you struggled with functioning in society, like how much is your health impacting your ability to do these things. You can also tap into these. I obviously haven't tracked a ton of these, but you can tap in and get a bit more data about kind of like what symptoms seem to correlate with struggling to socialize, struggling to work, etc. But even just this count of essentially like these factors is going to be helpful for your doctor. Another way to view these as well is to open the stats and insights section for factors, and then to this is just a shortcut to get to the same place. There should be a graph, I thought, for these, maybe not. But yeah, essentially this is one of those things as well where you might not really think about it ahead of an appointment, but it's important to get these things set up when you first start using Bearable to help yourself during an appointment. Like, you need to be tracking the correct information to share with your doctor rather than just tracking symptoms and factors that you want to track. You need to think about like, what does your doctor want to see so that they can help you. These are probably some of the most important things that fall under that category. So I would definitely encourage you to kind of track these things. And then, like I say, in the trends tab, you can get a count of how often they occur, which is really what your doctor's going to want to know. Probably just over a 30-day period, they're going to say, how often were you struggling to socialize? How often were you struggling to work or struggling to complete everyday tasks in the last month? You know, if that's fairly high, they're going to be worried. They're going to want to help you. Do you have any history of this? Obviously, your family's medical history, your own medical history. In the trends tab, you can look back at, a year of data. You can look at your own data. There are ways for you to track family history. I think ahead of an appointment, speak to your family about whether they have a family history of a condition. So this might be a family history of ADHD symptoms, like mum struggles with task paralysis. Make a note of it. And then in your appointment, when that question gets asked, you know that you've saved it to your extra notes. You know you can refer back to it. You might not remember off the top of your head during an appointment. Brain fog, anxiety, all of these things that happen when you're sat in front of a doctor are going to happen. So like make notes of stuff ahead of time to answer these questions. It just makes it easier than having to kind of like pull this out of thin air in the moment. Have you had any procedures or major illnesses in the past 12 months? I feel like this feature gets overlooked a little bit because it's kind of a bit hidden away, but in your settings page, you can add significant events, and you can see here I had an ADHD doctor's visit 15 days ago, but you can also add like acute one-off events here for illnesses. So that could be that you had the flu in October, and it's just, again, an easy way to record any kind of like one-off random things that occurred. Just visiting the significant events tab, you'll be able to see a list of these things. I believe that they also appear in your timeline view as well as significant events. So you can just kind of see, in recent months, whether when did we log it? October. Oh, that doesn't seem to be appearing for some reason. Maybe it's better then to just use this tab to kind of see when these things occur. Oh, it's because I logged it for this year. That's why. There we go. So, yeah, significant events, that's the place to answer this. Maybe before an appointment, have a think back. Was there anything that happened over the past 12 months that was kind of an acute event that you wouldn't track daily in Bearable, but it might be useful to have a record of in Bearable, so that when you're asked about these kind of like procedures or major illnesses, you've got some record of them that's kind of easy to take a look back at. The other place you can view these is if you go to the impacts tab or the trends tab. You can like rotate your device to landscape mode. You'll be shown a new graph. I can't screen record it because it doesn't work that way on the laptop. But that will basically let you like see your significant events plotted along the x-axis on the date they occurred. You can view that chart on a 360-day view. You can plot your symptoms there. You can plot your factors there. It's one of the ways you can do like a manual search for correlations or like before and after effects of a significant event, or when you begin a medication or you begin a new treatment, you can kind of get a sense of how that impacted your health outcomes using that chart. But it's just one way to view significant events as well. Generally, though, I'd say the best way to look at those is just if you've logged them, they're in here. It's very easy just to kind of get a view of all of your recent significant events. Maybe one other way you could think about that is if you have an extra note about it. So you could say like recent procedures or illnesses. Oh, actually, but that's the title. We could say October 2024. We have the flu. And so again, in your extra notes in your timeline, you've got the option just to quickly filter for extra notes and like see this information that's going to be relevant for your medical appointment. What prescription meds, over-the-counter meds, vitamins, supplements you take, etc. So obviously, you're probably already going to be tracking these in your medication section in Bearable. I take some, in this demo account, I take some over-the-counter painkillers. As with some of the other sections we've looked at, you can go and look at changes in dose over time. Again, this is just a sample of information, but it's really easy. Again, maybe you could screen grab this section. If you set them up in a group, it actually might be a bit more of a condensed view. So if you just want to give a really quick overview of your like daily meds, put them all into a group, screen grab it, share it with your doctor. That'll show them average dose and each of the meds. But essentially you have that information here. And if they have questions about changes in dose over time, all of that information is here as well. Also, the date when you started taking these medications too. What allergies do you have? I mean, I think this is probably one that you can answer off the top of your head. If you're not tracking them in your symptoms section, that's fine. Maybe, again, this is a good thing just to add to extra notes. You can just have a reminder of my allergies. For me, that's gluten, soy, dairy. And then, have you served in the military? That might be less relevant to British folks watching this. Again, maybe make a note of that here. Perhaps that's something that could be added as a significant event if you have if you are a military service member, if you have had active duty, track it when it began, when it ended, track it as a factor for all the days you were active as a service member, or perhaps the day that ended as a significant event. So you've got options for that. I don't know how useful that is. I don't know how often that'll come up. But if you do need to track that, factors and significant events are your friends there. And then, do you use any kinds of tobacco, illicit drugs, or alcohol? These are things that are really easy to track in your factors section as well. So here, in my triggers list that I created using the Add Edit button, I've got a triggers section. I've got alcohol, cannabis, cigarettes, and refined sugar, just generic things that probably have an impact on everybody's health. And I can track them based on the daily quantity that I take, and then view how that changes over time. So let's just add a couple of ratings in here so I can show you an example of how this might appear. So again, we can go to stats and insights. We can specifically look at triggers. We can see that over the last 30 days, I've had refined sugar on 8 days. I've had alcohol on 4 days. I've had a lot of alcohol on 3 days. And again, you can tap into all of these to get a picture of how they seem to be impacting mood, how they seem to be impacting symptoms, whether they have a same-day effect or a next-day effect, etc. So there's a lot you can break down here. I think really a doctor is just going to want to know, do you use them? Which do you use? How often do you use them? And so this is really the screen that's going to be useful, because you're going to be able to say, in the past month, I've used tobacco this many times. I've used alcohol this many times. I've used a specific drug this many times. So you can probably screen grab this, and it will just very quickly highlight that number, so you can just share it with them very, very easily. But again, that's just in your other factors, stats and insights, and then wherever you've tracked it, whichever group you've tracked it under. My advice again would be track it as a trigger, just because it's a useful way to think about your factors in Bearable. So I think basically we've covered each of these questions. Obviously, a lot of this is about making sure you're tracking the correct things up front when you first start using Bearable. It's not necessarily tracking everything, but it's tracking the things that are going to be useful for an appointment. So how much do things impact your ability to function in society? How often are you doing certain habits that might impact your health? When did your symptoms begin? When did your symptoms get worse? That type of information. There's actually one thing that isn't mentioned in these questions, which I think probably does get asked, which can be symptom frequency. And so in the symptoms section, you can obviously track symptom severity and changes in severity over time, but not necessarily frequency. And I think that one of the best ways to do that is, it's a bit of a workaround solution, but you can duplicate a symptom in your health measurement section. For example, one of my symptoms is hip pain, and I'm tracking the severity of hip pain. I'm actually also just able to I'm using a 1 to 10 scale here to track how my pain score is throughout the day, whether it changes throughout the day here. So I'm doubling up that symptom severity score with a with a more specific rating. So if a doctor wants to know on a 1 to 10 scale, how severe was your pain on a date or on average or over a period of time, this is kind of one way to do that. So using their scale rather than using our scale. But another thing you can do is count the number of times something happens. So one of my other symptoms is anxiety. And so one of the things I experience as a result of having anxiety is panic attacks. And so I can track the number of panic attacks I have per day, per month, etc. And again, we can have a look at that. So I can select panic attacks here. I can see that in the past 30 days, there was a period where I had a panic attack every day up until the 10th of Jan. And then there were a couple of days where I had 2 panic attacks. And then it's kind of been like more severe since this period, although I'd say that any panic attacks are probably severe. This is obviously just demo data. I didn't really experience them at this level, but this is just to illustrate that you can track the frequency with which you experience symptoms and click into the reports for custom health measurements to like very quickly and easily represent changes in frequency of symptoms to your doctor. So again, if like a doctor wants to know the frequency of a priority symptom, if you went to see your doctor about panic attacks, this would be the way to show them very quickly and easily how often they occur, at what level they occur. And you can kind of maybe support this with separately like your symptom severity scores for anxiety as well. So I think that's the only other thing that was maybe missing from these questions too, was just about occurrence. Again, as with the other sections, you can just use this like add edit button to create a custom measurement. This could even be like pain frequency. Maybe you have something like, let's actually be more specific. Maybe it's headache frequency. Set it up as a count. We want to know the total. And let's use that icon. And then what we can do is say, okay, well, we want to know how many times a day I have a headache. Today I've had 1. Previous day I had 2. And then you could also, because these are time-stamped, if instead of just like doing a count for the day, you could also time-stamp them and say, well, I had a headache at 9:28, and then I had another headache at 6:30 as well. And so you can kind of get as specific with these as you want. This will show you the total here. If you select total, if you want to view the average, this would obviously be 1. You can get more specific with these two. You saw that when we were setting this up, you can have 2 decimal places. So if you want to have 1.35 or whatever, that's totally possible as well. You just need to make sure that when you're customizing these and creating them, you have that set up too. So yeah, I'd say just think about tracking frequency for symptoms where that's useful. That might be for things like headaches, or things that occur multiple times a day, because that's not going to be naturally tracked as part of your symptom tracking. And then the only other thing I'd add before we end this video is do go and Google questions to ask during your appointment, what questions to prepare for during your appointment. There's great information from the NHS, from the Mayo Clinic, from the CDC, about kind of like what you should do to prepare for an appointment, listing all your medicines or bringing all your medicines with you, identifying your 2 or 3 most important questions, writing down details of your symptoms, kind of like we looked at. That data already exists in the app, but maybe it makes sense to actually make a note of that stuff ahead of time, screen grab it, put it into a doc, print it out and take it with you ahead of time. I think one of the things I found really helpful as a person with multiple chronic health conditions too, is that because of brain fog and anxiety and other things that might pop up that make it hard to communicate during a doctor's appointment, is to actually just like ask a friend or somebody to come with you to like help you advocate for your health, help them to prepare ahead of an appointment too, like share the same information with them that you want to share with your doctor, tell them what you're trying to get from the appointment ahead of the appointment too, just so that they can help reinforce what you're saying, just so they can help clarify what you're trying to communicate. I found that really helpful to just have somebody there with me for when I kind of forget what I'm trying to communicate, if I'm struggling to find the words, they might be able to help me with that. It's just also useful to have somebody there that maybe understands you and supports you to like help reduce any anxiety you might have in an appointment as well. If you experience medical gaslighting, which I have in the past, it can help to have a friend there to kind of like push back against that, because being on the receiving end of medical gaslighting can be quite difficult as well, obviously. So yeah, having a friend can be really, really helpful if that's possible. I think this is another good point too, like, don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to like get a doctor to clarify what they mean. Don't be afraid to ask them how they reached a conclusion about your health. Ask them to put that information into your medical record as well, so that if you get a second opinion, that information exists for somebody else to look at as well. It can be quite tough to be assertive in medical appointments, but I think it's important to like make sure that you have a really clear understanding and a really clear record of all the decisions that are being made about your health. And so don't be afraid to just like request that, push for that, make sure it's written down, make sure it's added to your medical record, make sure you get an explanation that you understand before you leave an appointment. And then let's just have a quick look to see if there's anything else. It might not appear here. I know, maybe it does. I think that asking for resources, asking for information about support groups, communities, asking for medical records, asking for reports, asking when you'll get results back, making sure this information is added to your record as well. Like, make sure you've got clarity on when you'll receive information, what options are available to you, those types of things as well. That kind of easy to forget during an appointment. And again, what I'd say is you can take some of these questions and again, literally just drop them into your extra notes section. You could have a note called questions for my appointment, and you can start listing them out. So if there's anything that you feel you might forget, you can just drop them in here. And then when you go to your timeline and filter by extra notes, you've got a section called questions for my appointment. You know that when you're in your appointment, you can look at your phone, go through these questions. You don't have to think of them off the top of your head. You've got them right here for yourself already. So yeah, do a little bit of research before time. Make sure you're tracking the right things in Bearable. Make sure to like take some time before an appointment to like write down the questions you have, to like clarify why you're going, the supporting information that you need to like justify, why you're worried about a symptom, the things that you think might be impacting it. Have all of that information available either in the app, in your notes, screen grabbed and printed out in a Word doc of some format. I think just having a really clear picture of what you want to get from your appointment, why you're there, the questions you have, what the next steps are, that's all the important stuff. So being very focused and very prepared is useful. This is kind of how you do it. Do go and Google the name of the symptoms for your conditions. Do go and Google the questions that a doctor will probably ask you, and just make sure that you've kind of got the information that they want, rather than just giving them the information that you've already collected. Make sure it's kind of in a format that makes sense to them, rather than just making sense to you. Obviously, as with anything else, if there's something I haven't covered here, get in touch with me at support@bearable.app. I can help you to figure out what you should be tracking for your health conditions, or ahead of a doctor's appointment, or how to access this information yourself. Something that I should probably just touch on very quickly as well is that extra notes is a premium feature, but actually you'll see that there's a free way to do this too. For any of your symptoms, for any of your other health outcome entries, there are notes sections. So you can add these notes to symptoms, to sleep, to mood. You don't have to add them in the extra notes section if you don't have a subscription. So you can do this for free as well. it'll just be a case of saying like, questions for doctor's appointment. You can save it that way instead, and that way you should still filter by extra notes. Let's just check. Oh no, okay, so instead of using extra notes here, you might have to filter by symptoms, and you'll see here, related to hip pain, I have a question, and I'm interested in support groups. So this is kind of a workaround for free users, if that's helpful for you as well, if you're not a subscriber. Cool. Like I say, get in touch with questions, and hopefully this is a bit more of a like concise explanation of like how to tackle questions in a doctor's appointment. Hopefully this is helpful and actually helps you to kind of get what you want from your next doctor's appointment too.